when you're torturing yourself with the idea that this person's doing it right and I'm doing it wrong, that's when it's like, that sucks. Don't do that. Remind yourself that you are probably seeing something from somebody, from the height of somebody's career. So don't let these thoughts ruminate in your mind, because it might stop you. If I was to talk to that kid again, I would try to tell him like, hey man, just focus on done. Focus on finished. Finished is infinitely better than perfect. Most people can't finish stuff. So you're not alone. Perfect is an illusion. Perfect is subjective. Finished. Focus on finished, man. On average, the human brain contains just over a liter of juice. And for this show, I'm going to use every last drop. Welcome to Brain Juice with Noah Chrysler. That's me.
I want you to get it. I want you to understand. I'm doing the best I can, but not as good as I want to be. I just want to get it. I just want to comprehend that I have to make amends with the monster inside of me. But I keep forgetting things I need to know. Where I'm from becomes the great unknown. And I can't seem to get it.
All right. Hey guys, welcome to the show. Welcome to Brain Juice with Noah Chrysler. That is me. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to be making a series of videos that I'm going to call my failure resume. One of my favorite podcasts is called Hidden Brain with Shankar Vedantam. He's a goat, and he always says that. He goes, "This is Hidden Brain. I'm Shankar Vedantam."
This is Hidden Brain. I'm Shankar Vedantam.
It's a great show. And one of those episodes I listened to a long time ago was about failure and about learning from failure. He talked, I believe he brings on a guest. Again, I haven't heard this in years, but from my recollection of the episode, he brings on a guest who talks about the idea of a failure resume. Basically, this was an idea, I think it was like in like 2016 or something. I think like a Harvard professor, there's actual, you can go and Google this stuff if you want the actual details, but it was this idea that was done by these two academic professors where basically they shared their professional failures, right? They shared all of the programs that they applied to and they got rejected from, and they shared all of the times in their career that they tried to get a grant or something and then they failed to get it. And the reason why they did this, I think, was to learn from those mistakes, but also to show people and demonstrate and illustrate to people that having success is not like, it's not like, I don't know. I think I go through my life with this idea that like, oh, other people, when they do things, it usually works out for them, right? And it's this like inherent belief that is subconscious. And I know it not to be true if I really think through it, right? Because obviously that's a crazy thought. But I think subconsciously when we're on social media and we see so much like, hey, I had success doing this. Hey, I had success doing this. I think it's very easy to let that be the place that you implicitly act from. And so I'm making this for a few reasons. The first one is if you are going through stuff, this video is going to be about my failures in high school. And I think there's going to be a theme in this video about how I felt very alone as I was experiencing a lot of these things. And I didn't really have many people in my life that I felt like I could talk about this with. And there were a bunch of creators that I looked up to and stuff in that time. And some of them would be open about their past mistakes and failures and things, but not in a way, I don't know. If I could, the idea is like, if I could potentially be that for somebody else, right? Hey, like, you're going to fuck stuff up along the way, right? That's a cool, I really would, I wish I saw that content when I was a 14-year-old kid, right? And I wish it was real and messy, right? Because also like people, I think the failure stories that I do hear, they have a nice bow on top of them. And the mistakes are not really mistakes. There are things that like the person telling the story is like framing as a mistake so that like they can look really good, right? And I'm going to try to not do that because that's a coward's way to do this, right? And look, and I will also say that this is very hard. This is my second time recording this because the first time I recorded this, I watched the footage back and I was so anxious and so on edge because some of these things, like, yes, they happened a long time ago. Yes, these people are probably over most of this stuff, but I was very defensive and very on edge. And instead of just sending it, right, it's like, no, this is my life. And these situations deserve to be treated with a level of intentionality and respect. And I want to make sure that I'm treating them with that. I'm treating the people in this story, I'm doing them justice, right? I am actually doing my honest best effort to understand how they were feeling at the time of these stories and why they made the choices that they made, and not strawman or diminish those other people in these stories, and not have a gut emotional reaction of like anger and defensiveness, right? Many of the people in the stories that I'm going to share in this series are not bad people, but sometimes they did things that made me mad. And so anyway, here we go. Sorry if that's a long intro. You know, there's that Jim Rohn quote that I talk about sometimes, and it's what you work on works on you, right? And as I've been making this, I recorded about 90 minutes of these, or even more than that, maybe about 2 hours, right? And I'm gonna re-record them all because I want to be more intentional with all of it. But as I was doing that, I realized it made me change about 4 different things that I'm currently doing right now. And it kind of blew my mind. It's like, and all of those 4 decisions I think are better and wiser decisions, right? They change my behavior in wiser ways. So that's a good thing. So I want to be more intentional about this, and I want to talk to that former version of myself. Say, hey man, like here are some things that you didn't understand about this situation at that time, and also like it's okay for you to experience and feel and go through the things that you're experiencing, while also being like, here's what I learned from these things. Cool. This is too long of an intro. Where are we at? We're at 7 minutes of me rambling. Cool. Without further ado, let's talk about the failure resume of Mr. Noah Chrysler. Here we go. When I was in high school, I'm just going to give you the kind of baseline, and then I'll give you the whole story. When I was in high school, I started my first YouTube channel. My first YouTube channel was called Freakin' Fantastic Films. It was a channel that I made. That I was just there was a club in my high school called the Broadcast Journalism Club, and broadcast journalism was a catch-all. It wasn't really broadcast journalism. It was like, hey, I really want to make video content. How do I do it? Well, go join the Broadcast Journalism Club, right? We called it Brojo Club. And so I joined Brojo Club, and because they had all this production gear, and I think technically we were supposed to use it for, making broadcast journalism pieces about like news stuff. And I did do some of that, but what it was more about for me was like, hey, I didn't grow up. We didn't have cable in my house, right? And so I came home off the bus, and I lived kind of far away, right? And so when I got home after school, I would have about 3 or 4 hours by myself and I didn't have cable, and I was always bored. And so you go on YouTube, or at least I did when I was a kid, and I would watch YouTube religiously, right? Until my parents got home or whatever, and we ate dinner and stuff. And so I would religiously watch YouTube. And so I was obsessed with YouTubers, right? At the time, I was obsessed with Rhett and Link, and I was obsessed with Philip DeFranco, and I was obsessed with this company called SourceFed that really inspired me and that I really, really loved. There was a creator named Mystery Guitar Man. I was a big fan of Ray William Johnson back when he was doing like vlogs and stuff. I was a big fan of Tobuscus, and many of these people that I'm talking about have had winding careers and has gotten a little bit canceled, and he is one of them. But I was obsessed with these people, and I wanted to be them. I wanted to make stuff that Olin Rogers, I loved Olin Rogers. It's a Monday. Ghost in the Stalls. Fantastic video.
I am the Master Commander.
I wanted to be these people, right? And I wanted to make work that they were making, right? And I saw Brojo Club as a way to do that. And the reason why this is on my failure resume is because I think that I remember feeling at the time that there was something wrong with me or something wrong with my work because these people could do this, and they could have all of this success doing this. They could make videos, and those videos would make money, and those videos would get insane amounts of views and do extraordinarily well on the internet. And I remember making videos, and I would not get the same rewards that I would see those other people getting. And so I thought, man, that means there's something wrong with me. you know, because as a child, you know, when you're 16 years old, right, like that is a conclusion that is right there, right? It's the surface level conclusion. They're doing it good and I'm doing it wrong. And because they're doing it good and I'm doing it wrong, they get these rewards and I don't. And so you might be wondering, like, why is this on my failure resume? And it's like, well, because that's how I felt about it at the time. All of these videos that I was making, I would start projects and I wouldn't finish them. Right. And later I discovered Casey Neistat's content, and he references that scene in Glenn Ross. Right. And he has this whole video about how, you know, what makes you a really good creator is finishing the business that you start. Right.
Someone who starts something and doesn't finish something, that is a loser. Someone who starts something and always finishes it, that is a closer.
Always be closing. A, always be B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing, right?
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only. You think I'm fucking with you? I am not fucking with you. A, always be B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing.
Glenn Ross, really good movie. You should go watch it. Basically, I felt this sense of shame that I was not finishing these projects, and that when I did finish a project, it wasn't getting, you know, hundreds of thousands of views and leading to all of these other opportunities, right? So I was comparing myself to these people who were so much farther along in their careers, right? And I was just beginning. And that is a normal thing, and and that's a normal thing that everybody does. But at the time, I remember thinking, man, there's something wrong with me. I want to talk a little bit about some of those projects from that time that I was working on, because I think it's interesting. One of my favorite videos that I made at that time was a series. It was supposed to be a series, but I never ended up making the whole series. I just made one video, and the video is called Noah Does Stuff, okay? And this video is, in the first episode, was about math homework, okay? And this video was just me sitting down to do math homework, right? No intro, no like, hey guys, it's just like a shot of me in my kitchen sitting down to do math homework. And it starts slow, right? Slow build. I'm sitting there, I'm doing it. And then I slowly become distracted, right? And I'm very quickly after problem one, like I am doing everything else but math homework, right? I'm like drumming on the desk. I'm fucking around. I'm playing a beat. I'm like doing weird accents and voice. I'm being a ham. And basically the idea of like, I can't sit here and do this math homework. It's crazy. Like, I can't do this. And at that time, I didn't know that I had attention deficit disorder. I was diagnosed with that later in my life. And it's so funny to think about that video and about how I was making this video about this disorder that I was dealing with. I did not know how to meaningfully address, and I'm making art about it without understanding at all that that's what I'm doing, right? I look back on that video and I love that video, right? It's like funny. It's a good video. I made a lot of projects in that time. Another video that I made was for the 24-hour film festival. I think I actually got like second or third place or something, which is cool. But I just remember it being this like it was like you have 24 hours to make a film, and I did it by myself, right? And I shot the entire thing on like a little digital camera with a my parents' digital camera that was a really piece of garbage, and I remember that the film festival landed, the 24 hours, the 48 hours or whatever landed on like a Friday or something. And so I remember that I had to edit most of it from my house, and my computer was terrible, right? I had a terrible computer with a very slow processor and very little RAM. And I didn't have any software, and I didn't have any money. So I remember stealing a cracked version of Sony Vegas and making it in that, not knowing what I was doing, but not letting that stop me, right? And I was very proud of that as well. And the video is ridiculous. You know, I play all of the characters. There's a secret agent. It's ridiculous and cringy. If you look back at it, it's very cringy. I'm wearing a wig. I play a female character, and the plot is fucking all over the place, man. But I got third place or whatever, and I was stoked about that. And it was done, right? I think that was a major learning is like, yes, I probably started 100 projects. Maybe that's exaggerating. I probably started at least 50 projects, but I finished about a dozen, right? And each one of those dozen that I finished, I remember those and I am proud of them. And I learned stuff from them, right? So I think, and also as a part of this video, I want to dive in on like what each of these experiences taught me, right? And so the first thing that the experience taught me is like, if you compare your work to other people's work, you are probably not doing a very sophisticated calculation, I guess is what I'll say, right? Comparing the work of a 16-year-old boy who is making his first video to someone who is doing probably some of the most rewarding and most polished and most meaningful work of their career, the most commercially successful work of their career, those two things, it's apples and oranges, right? And sometimes, if you do it intentionally, you can borrow things from those people and you can introduce it to your work, right? So there are good benefits to doing that, and most of the skills, most of the good things that I've put into my videos, most of the things I've learned have in a way come from that comparison, right? So to totally say don't ever compare yourself to other people is wrong, right? Many of the ideas for those videos, were borrowed from me comparing my work to other people's, right? But when you're not doing it intentionally, when you're doing it subconsciously, when you're torturing yourself with the idea that this person's doing it right and I'm doing it wrong, that's when it's like, that sucks. Don't do that. Remind yourself that you are probably seeing something from the height of somebody's career, right? You don't know what their life is like. You don't know what their career is like. You don't know how long they've been grinding. You don't know what they've gone through to be able to make the stuff that they're making. And also, like, they could just be getting lucky, right? That's probably not true for everybody, but some of them are probably getting lucky, right? So don't let these thoughts ruminate in your mind because it might stop you, right? So don't do that. Don't let that happen. Because like, if I was to talk to that kid again, and he was sitting in front of me right now, I would try to tell him like, hey man, your job is not to make something perfect, right? Don't try to make something perfect, right? Your job is to make something, okay? It's never going to be perfect. Just focus on done. Focus on finished, okay? Finished is infinitely better than perfect. When something's perfect, it's probably not actually perfect, right? Perfect is an illusion. Perfect is subjective. Finished. Focus on finished, man. Just the next video, just the next project. Focus on that. And if you can do that, most people can't. Most people can't finish stuff. So you're not alone. You're not alone when you feel embarrassed and ashamed that you didn't finish something, right? Most people never finish anything, right? So just be better than that, right? Just try to finish it. Other things that I learned from that, I mean, that is where I got my foundation in production, right? I learned everything about editing. I learned everything about like I don't know, that was my first exposure to like teleprompters and filming stuff and being on camera and editing, right? And here's how to like manage the footage. Here's how to use like a editing program, and here's how to organize your footage in a way where, you haven't created yourself a nightmare. Here's how to import footage from a DV. I remember we had to scan in the footage into an editing program from DV tapes, right? Because it was this like weird analog to digital transition that these cameras, were made in. And so I remember having to do that with those cameras. It was the foundation for a lot of my ability to create anything. And I look back on that with a lot of fondness. But I do remember feeling like, man, what's wrong with me? How come my outcomes aren't like the ones that my heroes have? And there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's okay. Like, this takes time. It's meaningful because it takes time. Right? If it was easy, everybody would do it and it wouldn't mean anything. So just focus on finished. Focus on just the next thing. And, And that's a lesson that I still struggle with to this day, right? Focus on finished, focus on just the next one. Don't make it perfect. Perfect is a waste of time, right? That's what I would say to that 15, 16-year-old kid. All right. Trying to keep my composure. Let's talk about the next one. Also, guys, before I jump into this, some stuff that I didn't talk about in the intro. This is not a comprehensive list of failures by any means at all, right? When I sat down and I wrote this originally, these are just the things that came to my mind and stuck out. And so this is not a comprehensive list. Also, B, like, I don't want to use this to like set a precedent of like, oh, when I mess something up, like this is how I'm going to respond to that, because that's not true. On some level, like, I don't owe an explanation for my life, right? Like, I don't. But I do want to share these specific stories because I think that they're interesting and I think that they're meaningful to me. And these are the ones I'm able to share right now, but it doesn't mean that I'll always be able to share those stories, right? I think boundaries are important. And so I don't think that this level of openness is something that should always be expected of me. And I guess there's a little bit of fear that like if people are like, oh, well, he's just going to talk about everything all the time. It's like, that's not, no. But with these things, yeah, you're welcome. You get to have a front row seat. Cool. Okay. Next failure. I was in high school. These are all from high school. I was in high school and I was invited to be a part of this like leadership program, right? It was for upperclassmen to train incoming freshmen and kind of welcome them to the school. It was like a Head Start program kind of, right? It was like, basically you'd have a buddy for the first couple of days. You're going from middle school to high school, right? So how does high school work? Here's my locker. Here's how we navigate to these different rooms around the high school and stuff. I was very, very excited for this program, which I know is dorky, but I was kind of a dork, right? The idea that I could be a kind of a mentor to somebody, a leader to somebody, that was really exciting to me. And I really, really loved that idea. And so they had this program. And I remember that the program, the start of the program was going to be at we were going into the summer because it was for the next year, right? So we were about to enter summer break, and the training for the program, I think, was at like 9 a.m., right? The problem is that both of my parents were going off to work at like 7 a.m., right? So I didn't have a ride, and at this time I wasn't able to drive. I think I was just turned 16 or something, and I wasn't able to drive there. I lived about 4 miles from the school, and I really liked mountain biking, and we lived on a mountain, and the school lived on another mountain, and there's like tons of hills and valleys and things, and I'm like, okay, I will bike to the school to attend this thing, and I was very excited to attend this thing and whatnot, and it was run by this woman, and what I realize now in my adulthood is that this woman, I think, spearheaded this program, and it was like a big deal to her, and she really, really, really cared about it. So I attempt to bike to this thing, and I bike to this program, and I arrive there, and I'm a little bit late. Now, when I'm re-recording this story because when I told this story originally, it felt like I wasn't doing that woman who is a character in this story, justice, right? In my original recounting of this, I said I was like 5 minutes late, right? I don't know if that is true. I think, now, like, when I really objectively think about this and I really bake on it, it's like, man, maybe I was 15 or 20 minutes late. Maybe I was 30 minutes late. I really don't know, right? But I was late because I biked there and there's mountains and I was covered in sweat and I didn't have a parent that could drive me to this thing. And I failed to plan to get there at 9 o'clock on time. And the person that put this together did send a memo that was like, hey, punctuality is very important in this. So, make sure you get there on time. Well, I didn't get there on time, right? And I remember being locked out of the thing, right? And I was like, and there was like an assembly going on in the lunchroom. And I remember like, is this program even going on? Like, where am I supposed to go for this? That sort of thing. And there was an assembly going on. There was nobody there to tell me that I was no longer welcome at the program. I remember that. And so I was just lost. And so I remember hearing the assembly going on. And I kind of like lightly tapped on the doors to the locked door to the lunchroom where this assembly was going on. And I lightly tapped on it because I was very, very excited to be a part of this program. And nobody answered. And so I tapped a little bit harder, and finally this woman comes out and she's very, very angry with me that I'm disrupting this assembly, which is understandable, like, whatever. And so I just remember I don't remember what was said, right? I don't remember what was said, but this woman seemed very, very angry with me. and I was late. And she communicated to me that I was no longer welcome to be in this program because I was late to the thing. And that really stung and hurt me a lot. And I felt very dejected. So then I was like alone on a Saturday or on like I don't know, I think like a Friday, or it was one of the first days of summer vacation, and I was suddenly locked out of this thing and alone in this school, on like one of the first days of summer vacation. And I just remember feeling very hurt and angry and dejected. But again, I want to approach this story from a place of understanding for that woman, right? When I was 16, I wanted to kill that woman. But if I'm going to use as much empathy as I can, that woman started that program from nothing, right? Me being late to that, she had no idea that I had biked there. I don't think I did have a helmet and I was covered in sweat, but she didn't know that like my parents, were working at 7 a.m. and I couldn't get a ride there, and technically I could have made other arrangements. I could have asked a friend's parent to drive me there, right? I could have networked to get a solution going, and I failed to do that, right? So anyway, this woman spearheaded this program, right? And she put this all together, and it was probably a lot of like professional risk on her end, right? She coordinated a lot of people. She had a lot of balls in the air, a lot of training going on. She was probably under an immense amount of pressure, right? That's one thing that is true. And she also felt disrespected by me, right? And I didn't understand that, right? Because that wasn't my intention. My intention was not to disrespect this woman, but I showed up late to her thing, to her big special day, right? I don't know whether it was intentional or not, whether it was a failure of character on her end or not, whatever. She probably took it personally that I was personally disrespecting her, right? Even though I didn't intend that. And so she acted very angry, it seemed, in that conversation. Again, I don't remember exactly what was said. I don't remember the conversation, but she was very angry. So she's having an emotional reaction in a conversation with a child, and she basically says, this is an opportunity. I don't remember the conversation, but this is my takeaway, is that what she was trying to communicate to me was like, this is an opportunity for you to learn the importance of punctuality, right? That is what she was trying to hammer into my mind, right? She had every intention of helping me in my future, right? And I believe that. Like, she had good intentions. But also she lost a little bit of control emotionally, I think. But that was what she wanted me to take away from that situation. And I was alone, and I remember sitting on the steps of the school trying to not cry and trying to keep it together. And as I was sitting there, I remember one of my other teachers who I had sit down with me on the steps. He came across me sitting there, and he sat down with me. So I'm sitting there on the steps. This teacher sits down with me, and he asks me what's wrong because I'm clearly not okay. And, this whole story spills out of me, right? Like, hey, I had to bike here, I was really, really excited to be in this program. And then this woman, we had this conversation, and I remember feeling again that idea like something is wrong with me, right? Now, again, in my adulthood, I understand that poor time management and poor planning skills are symptoms of attention deficit disorder. And so it doesn't make it okay, but it makes me understand the struggles of the kid that was in the story. But anyway, I'm sitting there and I spill my guts to this teacher, and I'm really hurt. And a little bit of context about my relationship with this teacher, right? Because my relationship with that teacher at that time was not the best. It's not that it was a bad relationship, but it was that it was colored with some previous experiences and some previous stories. So let's do a tangent story here so that you can understand the backstory of my relationship with the teacher that sat down with me to have that conversation with me. He had recently gotten news. We were in class one day, or it was like before class one day. This man had recently gotten news that one of his former students had passed away during the Iraq War. He was killed in action, and I don't know if he mentioned it to us or something, but I remember that like that was what that happened to him. He went through that, and it was somebody he was close to, and he was very emotionally affected by that. And I'm a 16-year-old boy, and I'm an idiot. So I'm sitting in class or before class, and and Modern Warfare 2 had just come out, and I'm sitting there talking with my friends, and when we're talking about this video game, and I was so excited about this video game, and my friends were too, and we're all talking about our favorite parts of Modern Warfare 2. And I was particularly talking about the crossbow, right? Because you could shoot the crossbow across the map and it would stick into somebody, and then it would have like a grenade in the crossbow bolt and it would explode. And then you would get your kill, but it was on this delay. And it was really cool. It was like in Modern Warfare 2 was like this innovative game. Really, really cool game. And we were all 16-year-old boys that really enjoyed it. And I just remember, and I was probably the most passionate about it because I'm a passionate person. And I remember sitting there and I remember being in his classroom and he got upset. He got mad, right? Because he had just gone through this situation where one of his former students had passed. And that was not top of mind for me. That was because it was probably a few weeks between those experiences, right? And so he lost his cool a little bit, right? He was like, hey man, like this game that you play is probably an attempt to like indoctrinate you and desensitize you to violence. It might be a recruiting tactic because that was a big narrative at the time, right? I think Jon Stewart had made a bunch of stuff about how like, you know, Call of Duty and all of these games, like the military is funding a lot of some of this, like some of these simulation games, the military is spending money to make these games to train the populace to go fight in combat. That was a narrative that was going on at that time. And even if that's not what was going on, right? Even if it's not the propaganda message, then there's also the messages about just like sensationalization of violence and desensitization of violence, right? And profiting off of the idea of like combat and violence. Like that was like, you know, violent video games. The whole debate there was like a big contentious thing that like had some legitimate, you know, points on both sides, right? And so, you know, he made the case that it's like, hey man, like, it's kind of fucked up. Like, you know, this is kind of fucked up, right? Like, and he got a little heated with me in the room, and I remember feeling embarrassed because I didn't mean to, you know, I was just excited about a video game, and I didn't mean to be insensitive, right? And he kind of called me out for being insensitive, and so I struggled with that a little bit at that time, right? And so this is the relationship that I have with this teacher. It's like he called me out. I felt a little bit humiliated by this man, a little bit prior, right? Not too bad, but like a little bit, right? And so that was a situation that happened prior to with this guy. And so anyway, back to the other story. I'm sitting there on the steps of this school and I'm trying not to cry. And I tell him, you know, I tried to go to this program that meant a lot to me and I was not allowed in because I made a mistake. And I and I don't want to sell this guy down the river, but I think that keeping it anonymous is fine. And I don't think that he would be mad at me if I shared this. But I can also cut this in the YouTube editor if I need to. But basically, like he told me, he's like, you know, don't tell this to anybody. And if you tell this to anybody, I will deny it. And I go, okay. And he goes, that lady sucks. He goes, she sucks. The lady that was mean to you sucks and she sucks. So like, you know, if she doesn't want you a part of her program, like that does not mean that there's something wrong with you. That does not mean that you're a bad person. It means that she is stupid and she doesn't know you. That's what that means, Noah. Like it means that and then he's like, you know, not only does she suck to you, she sucks to other people, right? He's like, other people have had similar interactions with her and that lady sucks. And then he's like, no, well, you're great, man. Like you're, you know, like if she doesn't see that, then, you know, then that is on her. It says more about her than it says about you. Fuck her program. Fuck her. Right? And that dude is awesome. That dude is awesome. So if you're watching this, thank you for that. If I was talking to that younger version of myself, I think I would make a few points. First, I would make the point of just because this woman was mean to you does not mean that she's evil, right? This woman is a complicated person probably, and she probably has a lot going on, right? This probably means a lot to her, and even though you didn't intend it, you made a mistake that felt to her like disrespect, right? And so if you can understand that, if you can understand what she's going through on the other end of your actions, and you can get out of your mind a little bit and more and better understand her, right? It makes it easier to deal with, right? It's not this problem with you. It's not the fact that you're unable to be on time and that you made a mistake and so you're a bad person. That is not the takeaway. It's that this person, you know, this was very important to this person. I accidentally insulted this person through my own negligence and whatever. That's the first thing, right? The second thing is take responsibility for the problem. Try not to be late to stuff in the future. Try not to fuck up. Like, try to actually make an attempt to be punctual and respect other people's time. That's important, right? People feel disrespected when you disrespect their time. That is a valid perspective and a valid take. And so, regardless of whether or not that woman acted properly, respect other people's time, right? She had a point. She had a point, buddy. Like, she's not just stupid. She had a point. She had a good point. So there's that. But more importantly than all of those things is that someday you will grow up and you will have a choice, right? And it won't feel like a choice at the time, but you will have a choice. You can choose to either be that woman, right? Or you can choose to be that male teacher, right? You can be very emotionally invested inside your own narrative so much that like when somebody disrespects you, you get angry with them and you lash out at them and you have a negative conversation with them, right? You can be that person, right? Or you can be somebody who sees somebody who's going through a hard time and empathizes with them and understands them and offers them encouragement. And one of those takes much more work than the other one, right? The thing that I think another thing that bothers me about that woman's approach now that I'm an adult is that it was a lazy approach. I think that's a lazy approach. I made a mistake for sure, but I was a young child and I didn't intend it, and I think that what I would do probably, hopefully, is that I would try to do the work to, one, show that child that was wrong, right? And that he made a mistake. And two, I would then do the work to get that child up to speed. If I had missed any of the information, I would try to get that child up to speed. If I was nervous about that child being late for future things in the program, I would do the work of helping that child make a plan to not be late for things. Well, how come, you were late today? Why were you late today? How can we set an alarm? How can we get you a ride? How can we do work so that you understand that it's not good to be late because it's disrespectful to other people's time? And how can we make a system that helps you not be late in the future? That's what I think, that's what I want to do if I am one of the adults in this story later in my life. That's who I want to be. And if I can't be that, then I want to be the teacher who sat with me on the stairs saying, hey, some people in this world kind of suck sometimes. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. When you're in positions of power, don't exploit them to make yourself feel good and to fill a hole within yourself, right? Use power for good and don't take aggression out on people who are less powerful than you to fill something inside of you. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this show and watching this episode of Brain Juice with Noah Chrysler. That is me. Guys, we're in the mid-roll here. Here are a couple different ways that you can support the show. First, you can support us by engaging on social media. If you're watching on YouTube or whatever, hit the like button and leave a comment. I would really appreciate that. It helps out the show quite a bit. Helps tell algorithms, hey, people enjoy engaging with this and this is thought-provoking. So that would really be really cool. Tell me about something you've failed at and you've goofed up and you dropped the ball on and what you've learned from that. Also, guys, you can leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform of choice. I do request it as 5 stars just so that you don't nuke me and send our show rating to the shadow realm. Also, if you're feeling generous, you can go check out patreon.com/Noah Chrysler. There are 3 different levels of support there, and I would really appreciate that. But that said, I know that that's money stuff. No pressure to do so, but it's there if you are interested. Thanks again for watching. The best way that you can continue to support this show is just by continuing to listen to this. The show is evolving. I'm trying to make it better. I'm assembling a team of people to help me make better content, and I am earnestly trying. So gracing me with your attention would be really cool. And I will try to do that justice. Thank you to my cousin Brandon Chrysler for editing this show. Brandon, you're the best. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Could not do this without you. If you want to contact Brandon for all of your production and editing needs, for sound production, he's also doing some video stuff, video podcasts, that sort of thing. You can reach out to him. His email is blc9918@gmail.com. That's blc9918@gmail.com. Reach out to him with freelance projects, that sort of thing. Also, guys, thank you to Second Suitor for the use of our theme song, Get It, from their 2018 album, Safe Space. Go check them out on Spotify. They're awesome. Thank you guys for letting us use the intro. And I made the intro too, and it's very personal, but I think it's cool. So it's me. And I'm not an expert in much, but I am an expert in me. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and back to the episode. All right, guys, this next story is about how I tried and failed to make a talk show in high school. I tried to make a talk show in high school, and I failed ultimately. Cool. Quick overview. I'm in high school. I'm watching all of these YouTube videos. I'm in the broadcast journalism club, and I'm like, awesome. Okay, I'm watching SourceFed particularly, and was this one SourceFed host named William Haynes. William Haynes, if you ever watch this video, thanks for having a career, and thanks for, making the stuff that you make. And all of you guys over at SourceFed, thank you for making the stuff that you've made, because it's had a profound impact on me and my life. Cool. William Haynes was on SourceFed that I watched religiously, Table Talk, every single day after school. And William Haynes really wanted to be a talk show host. And he would talk about how that was his dream. And I was like, oh man, I kind of want to be a talk show host. I should make a talk show. I'm going to make a talk show. And so I try to make a talk show, right? And I'm like, okay, what is a talk show? Talk show is like 2 cameras, it's 2 people, it's like microphones, it's 2 chairs. It is, a set of some kind. It's like a table, and then it's got some sort of premise usually, right? Like, oh, late night, or like, and I was like, okay, well, if you're just drinking coffee, that's like probably a decent premise. Maybe I potentially internalized some of like the iced coffee hour, but I think that this was before then, but I don't know, whatever. I'm trying to make this show where I sit and I have coffee with people around the school, potentially students, potentially staff members, whatever, basically interesting people to have on a talk show. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I remember like, man, okay, cool. If you're going to make a talk show, how do you do it? Well, there was other members of the broadcast journalism club, and so I recruited them to be my crew. And I'm like, guys, will you help me make this? Which was intimidating, because it's like, it's weird to ask people that, hey, I have this idea and this dream. Can you help? Like, can you take time out of your busy life and help me with this idea and this dream, please? And because that opens you up to rejection, right? And some people say yes, and so other people go, no, I'm busy, and also you seem crazy, so no, and whatever. So I remember doing that, and I had this crew, right? Then I also had gear. I had camera gear through the Broadcast Journalism Club. Great club, fun local arts programs, especially stuff required like that involves cameras and microphones, because you never know if like David Bowie goes to the school, but he didn't have a band program, so he never learned how. I'm not a big David Bowie fan. Anyway, whatever. Fund the arts. Cool. So I've got gear. I've got a crew to potentially help me film this thing. Now I need a set. Okay. And so I'm running this over in my mind over and over again. And I talked to my dad, and my dad is like, what you could do is, you were in the musical, and I remember that they had a set piece on stage, in the musical. And so what we could do is, if you could ask the people at the school if you could borrow that. And then what we could do is we could take that home in my truck, and we could paint the whole thing and, make it a set for your talk show. And then you could use that. And I'm like, that's a fantastic idea. And I remember that too was like a hard conversation. Cause again, this was an idea that was in my mind that like, it took a lot of like, that's a ballsy thing to do, to say, hey, I want to be a star at a talk show, Dad. Like, can you help me? And he was like, of course. And he did. And so I remember I went to the staff at the theater wing, and I don't remember who I talked to. But they very graciously, these people did not have to let me do this, right? It was like a big pain in the ass, and they didn't have to let me do this. And they let me take this set home, because nobody was using this set, and they let me take it home. And this thing weighed hundreds of pounds, right? And so I remember like we drove my dad's truck. I don't even know if my dad was with me. I just remember that like I was like, cool, I was on a mission. I need to get this set to my house. I think I drove his truck. He probably went with me. I don't really remember. But basically, we picked this set up. We go take it to my house. We work on it for a week or two. We paint the whole thing. We make a logo. We cut a logo out of a quarter-inch, not plywood, but like, a nice sheet of wood. And that's like the coffee mug logo. And that is on the wall, and it looks kind of like a living room, and that's the set, right? And so I'm like, cool. So suddenly I have a set, and I bring it back to the school, truck it back, and this thing weighs hundreds of pounds, and it needs to be drilled together. So I remember having a drill with a bunch of screws and stuff. And the day comes to film this thing. So we've got a crew, we've got gear, we've got a set, and now what I need coffee. And I need a guest, right? So coffee, you can go and you can make that in the break room, right? You can make that in the teacher's lounge, but that's also like kind of an intimidating thing. I know that's stupid, but like I was a 17-year-old kid. So like, saying, hey, can I go to the teacher's lounge to make coffee? Because I'm working on this silly project where I'm going to make a talk show. That's a big sentence to say to some random teacher who's like, what? I'm busy. So whatever. So I get a thermos, and we got the thermos of coffee done. Cool. Now I need a guest. And so there was this one teacher at the school who was a substitute, and he was a new substitute, and he was a cool guy. He was like a cool young guy. And the interesting thing that I thought was interesting about the situation was that there were, high school girls. This guy was probably maybe in his late 20s, right? And there were high school girls that like had developed crushes on him, and there were multiple. There were many of them. Like I knew like 5 of my female friends that had big crushes on this guy. And I'm like, okay, it'd be really funny to ask him about this during the show, during the interview. And so I brief him quick. I'm like, hey, be on this talk show with me. It'll be really fun and whatever. And he agrees. But apparently at that point, I think I floated the idea of like, hey, I'm going to ask a question about this. And I think at that point, he tried to communicate like a hard boundary of like, I absolutely do not want to talk about that on a recorded thing that's going to be broadcast to the school. That sounds like a fucking nightmare, right? And I did not get that, right? Because I was a 17-year-old who was not really concerned and thinking about other people. And so I was just like, I'm going to make a talk show as a monument to my ego. And so that was my narrative. And I'm like, that's all I'm thinking about. Right. And so he might have said that. He might have not. I don't even know. But I did not leave that conversation with that understanding. And so the day of the shoot comes, and I've got the set, and I drill the set, and the set's fine, and I've got these production guys, and I've got some gear, and we set up. This is more setup and the biggest project I had ever done up to this point, right? I have never done anything like this. This is my first time doing this, and it's exhausting. And I severely underestimated the time estimate, right? I'm like, oh, it'll take an hour. That is not ever the case. Always overestimate your time estimate, because it did not take an hour. It took longer than an hour. And so I've got these guys there, and I'm like, oh guys, it'll be an hour. No. And I felt terrible eventually, because it's like I basically lied to them, because I didn't know that it was going to not take more than an hour. I did not know that it was going to take more than 1 hour. And then we start shooting the thing, right? And I'm hosting the show. I start with a couple like, softball questions, just like, casual conversation, la, la, la. And then I hit this guy with the big question, right? So it seems like all these 16-year-old girls have crushes on you. and he goes, what? And then he sets like a hard boundary during the conversation. He's like, I'm not going to talk about that. And I was like, oh, and that kind of sucked, because that was what I wanted the interview to be about, right? Which is not good. And he wasn't comfortable with that. And I just remember feeling very deeply uncomfortable. Because then it's like, oh shit, like it seems like I started this whole thing to talk about just this thing, and it's like, that's not what I meant to do. I didn't make a whole talk show just so I could grill this man about these 16-year-olds that have crushes on him. I made a talk show, and I was going to grill this man about these 16-year-olds that had crushes on him. It was not exclusively for that. Anyway, he sets this hard boundary during the conversation, and again, I was not prepared for that, right? Like, when I was young, I took that as like, oh, somebody's being mean to me. And it's like, no, they're not being mean to you. Like, that is a reasonable thing. That is a completely reasonable boundary to set. And you know, you not taking that into consideration is actually very inconsiderate. And so, you know, whatever. But I didn't, and he was kind of cool about it too. Like, you know, he set a hard boundary, but then like, you know, it was like, hey, let's move on to something else, right? But I just remember feeling very, very, very embarrassed. And so whatever, we filmed the whole thing. We've got about 25 minutes of footage, which is great because that means I can cut together something, right? And I had the usable footage and whatever. Cool. We tear everything down, and I felt really bad because, like, I think somebody had to use the room. We were using the auditorium, and somebody else had to come in for the auditorium. And so I felt bad because I was holding them up, and that was terrible. And then I felt bad for holding up the production people and whatever. And but we get all done, and all of the stuff is recorded. But this weird social faux pas happened during the thing because I didn't anticipate any of this stuff. And I just remember the next day, and it's like, okay, like I did all of this work. I did all of this work to make this happen, and I involved all of these people, and then I remember feeling shame and embarrassment because I accidentally crossed this boundary, and I didn't know how to process any of that, right? It's like, why did I cross this boundary? Well, I was so trapped in my own head and in my own ego that, like, you know, I didn't even think to acknowledge that. I didn't even think about what the experiences was going to be like from that guy's perspective, right? And I felt really guilty about that. And as a result, I never actually ended up editing that footage. And it sat on those cameras, and I don't know whatever happened to it. But I remember feeling very ashamed because, you know, I was beating down this path, and I was blinded by, you know, my own self-interest, and I didn't empathize with like what his experience might be like, you know, being the talent in this production, right? And I remember thinking, oh, like I am putting my needs, I accidentally put my needs in front of this guy's, and so I felt guilt and shame, and that guilt and shame basically stopped me from editing that thing. Also, not just the guilt and shame, but like editing a 3-camera talk show as a 17-year-old on a computer that kind of sucks, you know, on a Mac. At the school they had Macs, but like, you know, you'd have to edit in like the 45-minute block of time, right? And editing takes a very, very, very long time. And if you're going to edit in 45-minute regimented blocks, like, good luck, man. Especially if you have attention deficit disorder. And so I basically failed to edit this project, and I failed to close the project, always be closing. And that really sucked. I remember that sucked, right? And then there's a fear that you have where it's like, man, am I just this guy? Is this what I do? Is I kick up all this dust and dirt, and I start all this stuff, and I involve all these other people, and then I fail to finish it? Is that who I am? Is that just what I am and who I am? And you get caught there. So if I'm talking to that 17-year-old kid who tried to make a talk show and who felt embarrassed for crossing some lines during the talk show, here's what I would say to him. Hey man, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. You made some mistakes, and that's okay. But you know what? Like, you learned a ton of stuff, and you'll take those experiences and you will use those experiences for the next 10 years, if not much longer. And those experiences are going to serve as the foundation for your eventual career. And you are at the beginning of this, and it's amazing that you are learning these lessons at 17 years old. Because some people don't learn these lessons well into their 20s or 30s or much later into their career. And you're front loading all of this knowledge. That is so cool. So focus on that. Also, you know, you're right a little bit. You're right. Your ego, you know, you were a little bit self-obsessed, and you weren't thinking about how your actions were influencing the other people in this project. And you probably were making decisions based on your ego. You know, you wanted to make this show. You wanted other people to see you on a show. But you know what? That's all. You know, part of that is okay. That's okay, right? In ego is not always a bad thing, right? I think it's a mistake that people are like on some level, a healthy dose of ego gets you out of bed. A healthy dose of ego helps you be a good person, right? A healthy relationship with yourself, right? Not like, oh, I can do no wrong, but oh, hey, I have something to contribute, right? That is a really good thing. So, you don't need to be upset with yourself for wanting to make a talk show. You don't need to be upset with yourself for making some mistakes along the way. Hold yourself accountable, but forgive yourself. It's okay. It's okay. And also when it comes to executing things, right? When it comes to editing the footage of that thing, right? Accountability mechanisms are very, very helpful, right? Delegating parts of the project to individuals who are aligned with your goals, that is very, very helpful, right? You could have went to one of your buddies in the broadcast journalism club and said, hey, this is a very big project and I don't think I can do it by myself. You didn't know any of this at the time, but like what would have increased your chances of success there would be saying, hey, can you handle the edit of this, right? And then, hey, other person, can you handle like the day-to-day production, right? I'm going to focus on like the shoot and the talent portion of this and the content portion of this, right? And I really want to be able to use more of my bandwidth and more of my brain to focus on that. I need you to handle the shoot part. Then I need this other person to handle making sure that the edit gets done, right? That does not mean edit themselves. It does not mean you do a bunch of work for me because I'm in charge, la, la, la. It means, no, I really could use your help, like directing me to make sure I get this done, right? Delegation is a huge accountability mechanism that like is really good. Having good habits and routines is a really good like accountability mechanism. And I didn't know that at that time. And so after that experience, I just internalized a lot of shame and embarrassment that I went through all of this trouble to kick up all this dust and make all this stuff happen. Then I crossed this boundary because I was so in my own head about like, oh, this is what this is and whatever. And then that embarrassment caused me to not finish the project. And that like hurt so much. That hurt. And so if I could talk to that kid, that's what I would say. It's okay. You're learning more than most people, at this stage of your life. And just keep going. Just keep going. Don't let this slow you down, right? Because it did. It ultimately slowed me down a little bit. But that's okay. It was part of the journey. Also, to all the adults in that situation who tried to help me with that project, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I owe you guys so much, and you guys are cool, and I want to be like you someday. I want to be that guy for, somebody else. So thank you for your help. All right, guys, last story to round out my high school failures. Again, I want to make sure this is not a comprehensive list. I failed a lot. I failed a lot of stuff, and so but these are the ones that I wrote down when I originally made this list, and that I feel like are that I'm willing to share. And this last one stings a little bit. So cool. In high school, in the year 2013, I went and I looked up some of the details of this, and I tried to find the digital record of this, and I was able to find a little tiny bit, but not very much at all. In 2013, I attempted to host a Pokemon tournament in my high school. I've really enjoyed Pokemon my entire life, and in high school, I had some like-minded friends who also enjoyed Pokemon, and it was one of these things that we bonded over. And I remember we had played Pokemon since middle school. I remember like when we were in middle school, we would play the games before school, and I wanted to host a tournament, right? A nostalgic tournament for the game Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. And so I got a bunch of my friends who I knew were potentially interested in Pokemon together, and I organized this tournament, right? And so basically, I encourage everybody. The idea was we were all going to get a copy of Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. We were going to get a Nintendo Advanced SP, and we were going to reset our games on one day. And then 2 months later, we were going to have a tournament, right? And you come with 6 Pokemon that you trained from your copy of Pokemon Fire Red or Leaf Green, and you're on a team of 3 people, and there was like a bracket system. We were going to do this tournament. And as a part of this tournament, I collected an entry fee. Now, to this day, I do not remember what the entry fee was. But basically, I collected entry fees from each of the participants so that we could have a prize pool for the end of the tournament. Now, here's the thing. And here's why this is on my failure resume. And here's why I felt horrible about this. Is that the tournament never happened. And so if the tournament never happened, then return the money, right? Well, it petered out slowly, right? And so there was no like determined, like I didn't realize that like I am the person that needs to decide this is not going to happen. And I need to return this money to everybody. So it was not a black and white thing. It was like a series of weeks of gray area. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, wait, this is not going to happen. And then when it was clear that I needed to return this money, I realized that I did not have a record of who had actually paid me the entry fee. I can't remember if the entry fee was $5, $10, $20. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that I think I had over $100 or $100 of other people's money that I then had to return to them, and I didn't have a record of who had paid me what. And so what I tried to say was, guys, please ask me if you paid me. I don't want you to be upset with me. Please ask me for your money back, and I will happily pay you back for the money. And I remember I paid back a handful of people, but I remember at the end of it, it's like I have this pool of money that I don't remember who it is owed to, and nobody continued to ask me for their money back, probably because it was like, either they forgot or it was uncomfortable for them or something. And I just remember feeling really bad about that because, like I didn't want those people to hate me, and at the time I was a 17-year-old kid and I did not realize, like I again was very optimistic, about everything. And so I was like, oh, like this will work out. Like, like this, like it didn't even enter my mind that like this tournament might not happen. Right. And so I didn't make a contingency plan for what happens if this tournament does not happen. Right. And that was a mistake. Right. Begin with the end in mind is one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. And I failed to do that. And I just remember like, I don't know. And I knew I annoyed some of those people with that whole thing. And I felt really bad. And actually in making this series, I actually posted recently in one of those groups, and I apologized again. I hope I apologized when I was going through that, but I apologized again. And I asked those people, it's like, hey, if you did not get your money back, please send me a Venmo request. And I'm not kidding. I will pay you back today. I don't know how much money I owe you, but I will pay you back. And that is true. If you are one of those people that was in that Pokemon tournament, and I went to high school with you and I know who you are, so it's not just anybody, but like if that was you, I am happy to pay you back and I feel bad about the experience. It's not something that I've really lost sleep over for years and years, but like, I remember it feeling, it's on this failure resume because I remember it feeling like I let a bunch of people down and I remember feeling that I made mistakes. But yeah, basically, if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the game Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, you can basically you can train your Pokemon. You train a team of 6 Pokemon, and there are all of these additional ways that you can train your Pokemon and breed your Pokemon so that they are more competitive than other people's Pokemon, right? And all of them are very time intensive and very interesting, and they require a lot of graphs and spreadsheets and things. And it's a whole fascinating and complicated process. And so, I wanted to have a competitive tournament where we try to make like quote unquote perfect Pokemon. And what I discovered is that it takes a lot of time and it's very brutal to do that the quote unquote right way, right? Instead of like hacking and genning them in, like to actually go like back in those games too, like they were not upfront about the idea that like you could make perfect Pokemon by doing all of these hard different things that took a lot of time. And so that was part of the fun too. It's like these are like hidden processes within the game that can make your Pokemon more effective. And I just remember, going through that and actually breeding these perfect Pokemon for the first time and realizing like, oh my God, I have like 100 hours in this game file, right? To try to get this to happen for this tournament. And people were dropping like flies from the tournament, right? Like people were backing out like, hey, this sucks. I don't want to do this. And so I just remember like that decision. It was never black and white, and it was just this like ongoing gray area of like petering out, right? And people backing out. So anyway, whatever. I felt really embarrassed about that whole thing. I felt really embarrassed about the whole thing. The project got away from me. I was very excited. I went in with a lot of optimism, but I didn't close. I didn't close the project. And I tried to make it right. I tried to pay people back. I tried to do the right thing, but I probably fell short, and that stinks. So if I was talking to that 17-year-old kid version of myself, I would say that, hey man, you done goofed. You fucked this up. It's okay. It's okay to mess stuff up, but you messed this up. So you missed the mark. You missed the ball. Do everything that you can to publicly apologize to these people, even though it's embarrassing, right? And track down the people that you took money from and make sure they get their money back, right? I know that I ended the project with much less than $100. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember the exact figures, but like I remember feeling a little bit less guilt than if I just like took all of this money. But I was not able to return all of the money, and I don't know who had paid it to me. So yeah, I would tell that person that it's okay to make mistakes, but try to make it right. And the next time you do something like this, try to learn from this experience. When you accept money from other people, have all of the potential contingencies planned for, right? Or at least the reasonable ones, right? Plan for the contingencies so that if things go belly up, you know what happened. There's a plan for the money, right? Because that removes a lot of like the liability from you. It removes a lot of the potential for people to be angry at you. Also, life is not about having like completely being absolved of other people's anger, right? If somebody's angry with you, that's not your fault, right? You gave people an opportunity to advocate for themselves, which is a good thing to do. That said, there was probably more you could have done, right? Your job is not to appease angry people and be a doormat person. That is not what I'm saying. But instead, your job is to set a boundary and set a guideline for like what ethical, reasonable behavior looks like. And one way that you can help yourself walk the right path is by thinking through potentially bad contingencies before you get there, right? Have a plan before things go belly up. Don't spend a ton of time on it, right? But just like if it goes badly, fail to plan to fail, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, this one I feel bad about, and I'm trying to not be like squirrely and anxious about it. And whatever. And it happened 11 years ago, and I haven't lost sleep over it, but bringing it back out of the subconscious of my mind for this project, I realized it's like, man, like, I don't know. I was a very different person then, and I was a lot more headstrong, a lot more optimistic. And when you accept money from people, that changes relationships. You should know that as well. It makes relationships transactional. People then feel like they, on some level, and this is not a flaw with them, but some people feel entitlement once you accept money from them, right? And you feel that same thing, right? If you are paying for something, if you are exchanging money, you should receive goods and or services, right? That is a professional relationship, right? Once you are exchanging money, that is a professional relationship, and that comes with certain guidelines, right? Or it should come with certain guidelines. Whether you acknowledge it or not, money has rules attached to it, rules and societal expectations attached to it. So respect those rules, respect those societal expectations, and try to be somebody who doesn't screw people over. And that's a difficult and messy process. That is a difficult and messy process. And the only way to get it right consistently is to flub it a few times, right? And you have, and you'll continue to potentially flub it a few times here and there. But overall, you're trying to follow the North Star of doing a decent job. And that's okay. Guys, thanks for watching this episode and listening to this episode. We've added video to this podcast. I hope you find it somewhat engaging. It tracks my face. Look at this. Whee! I don't know. Thank you for listening to this show. I know it's been kind of all over the place, but we're trying to find a through line, and I like the direction we're headed in. Thanks for watching. In the next episode of this series, I'm going to talk about failures of mine from college. I was a pretty big failure in college. I make some more mistakes, and So yeah, if you enjoyed this, let me know. Post a comment, leave a review of the show, send whatever. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. Thank you to Second Suitor for the use of our theme song, Get It, off their 2018 album, Safe Space. Make sure to go check them out on Spotify. Also, thanks to Brandon Chrysler for editing this show.
I want you to get it.